back to the Babs Hockey Academy. Today I got the 4th episode, self-evaluation. Now this is a super important tool that you can use to evaluate your game and see where you're at. The biggest thing is getting a starting point. Most players just work on the things that they're not very good at, or coach tells them you need to be faster, and so they just go work on their speed. And they really don't have a firm starting point on where they're at, and then evaluate how they compare to the players on their team, their league, and as they move up. And so I'm going to give you a 2-step process to really help you evaluate your game and really see where you're at, and then take the necessary steps to develop your game. And so this is just giving you the tools to take control of your development. That's one thing that I wish I had growing up. I always just kept running through the circle, just working on the things that I'd make a mistake in a game, just work on that, and just really like throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. I worked really, really hard, but I didn't work very smart. And so this will help you work smart. This will help you target your development where you need to be, and at least give you a starting point. That's the biggest thing. Once you have a starting point, you can establish where you want to go, and then in between that gap, you can work and create a plan that will get you to fill that gap and get you to where you want to be. So now the first thing you want to do is really evaluate where you're at on your team. So there's 3 major things that I talk to players that I use to establish where they're at their team. So this way it sets them up. Okay, what's my mindset that I need to do going in and out of games? Like, how much leash do I have? So the 3 of them are you a bubble player, an established player, or a go-to player? And so a bubble player is a player, again, you're on the fringe. Coaches, you're either new to the team, your skill sets, or again, you're working to try and compete with everyone else. They're not at that average or just at the standard at that level, so you're working to grow. It's a little bit more catch up, so you really have to compete hard. Well, you got to compete hard at every level at each of these phases, but as a bubble player, you got less room for error. You got to be smarter about how you play, and it's really, again, it's a little bit slower process when it comes to growing your game. Then, are you an established player? An established player is one that's, again, has the skill sets that really fit the mold, the average in that group. Again, the coach can lean on you. You're a player that's been able to play at that level. You can compete, and you can even excel at the current level. And then a go-to player is, again, there's not very many of these players, but these are players that are hands down just above everyone else at the current level. They really have high level skill. They're above the curve. And again, there's a different mindset for that. You don't want players getting too complacent at that level. So it's really important to understand where you fall in those 3 categories. So again, for the bubble player, now just to discuss that one, when you're a bubble player, you really have to compete. You really got to be simple. You got to really be smart. You got to follow those whatever the coach says, you got to follow to a T. Whereas again, on contrast, when you look at the go-to players, they're going to have a lot more leash. Again, you see the offensive upside. There's a lot that they bring to the table because of the skill sets. So they're going to get a little bit more room for error. And so a bubble player shouldn't be trying to compare themselves to a player at that level. It's not good or bad. It's just different stages in your development. And then, like I said, when you understand that, you can set a plan in place to get yourself to be a go-to player. But that takes time. So we want to make sure we're at the appropriate mindset. So now with an established player, we need to really work to double down on your strengths. If you're an established player, that means you have the skill sets that really fit the average or slightly above average where you're at. So you really got to push yourself to get to that go-to player status, or to really get to domination. You really want to get your level, you want your gameplay up. So you really want to focus in on your strengths, the things that make you good, and you want to really excel them. And then when you go into that go-to player status, when you're that elite level player on your team, or at the current in that league that you're in, you want to work to continuously build on strengths, weaknesses, slowly working on those areas. Similar to where the bubble player has to be a little bit slower in his progression, it's the same thing with the go-to player. The development's going to be a little bit slower. You have to continuously push yourself and challenge yourself. Because again, it's so important that you don't get complacent. You might think, okay, I'm ahead right now, but as you can tell from players that start from, I know lots of players that were the head over heels better than everyone at 12 years old, but they stopped playing at the age of 16. And again, players get complacent, or again, they get too comfortable, and eventually everyone else catches up or they surpass them. So when you're that go-to player, we do not want to get complacent. We want to keep pushing ourselves. And so we understand that. Now let's establish our performance. Are we competing at that level? The next stage is, are we competing at that level? Are we excelling at that level, or are we dominating at that level? Those three things are really important. So we want to first be able, once we move up to the next level, like I talked about in adapting your game, you want to first be able to compete. That's where that high level compete, aggression, battle, you put that in your game. We need to first clear that first pillar. We got to be able to compete at that next level. Then you want to work to excel. Similar to the established player, these three fall in line. When you want to excel, you need to work to double down on your strengths, the things that make you the player that you are. You want to work to find those details that make you. Maybe it's your ability in front of the net to find those loose pucks. Maybe it's your ability to protect the puck. Maybe it's your skating ability to skate through the neutral zone. You want to double down on those strengths. You want to make sure you work through those skill sets so that you can start excelling at that current level. And then the final thing is domination. Domination requires you to slowly challenge those skill sets that you have that make you the player that you are and continuously work to grow. We don't want to get complacent. We don't want to sit back on what makes us a great player. There's a good example of this one is fast players. Players with very good skating ability, they tend to dominate the early ages because they're better skaters than everyone else. Or big players, they tend to physically just dominate players at youth level. But again, as you progress, everyone starts to catch up. You get complacent and you lean on your strengths, things that allowed you to excel and dominate at a current level. When you move up, now everything flattens out. You don't have the habits of competing and challenging yourself. You've got those complacent habits, and then people start surpassing you. Players start stepping over you. So we want to avoid that. We want to continuously challenge ourselves. So again, you've seen the first section right here. The top one is we have bubble player, established player, and go-to player. And what falls in line with that, the next one is, do you compete, do you excel, or do you dominate at your current level? When you work through these two sections, work to establish where you're at in each one and slowly push yourself, you're going to be able to self-evaluate, see where you're at, really fill that gap and get you to where you want to be. So thanks again for tuning in to this section of self-evaluation. Again, I really find this super interesting, and I'm really passionate about this because I wish I had this. I wish I thought like this when I was, again, thinking about where I was, where I wanted to go, trying to give myself a roadmap so that I can get myself to that next level and develop. So hopefully you found this helpful. On the website, I'll have a PDF that you'll be able to download that'll list out these two sections with each one of these that I talk about with a little description so that you can use that as a guide map to really self-evaluate, fill that gap, and get your game to the next level.